Hi, welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I wanted to share with you some of my antique books that I own, that I've collected over the years, lots of them from thrift stores, but not all of them. So the first one that I have here is this beautiful old edition of The Marble Fawn by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I've actually not yet read this one. My mom actually found it for me at a thrift store, and I think she thought that it was boring. And so she didn't finish it and she gave it to me. And I kind of have a mixed relationship with Nathaniel Hawthorne. So I don't know if I'll like it or not. But I do like how old and beautiful it is. It doesn't have a date in the beginning here as to when it was published, but it does have this note in the front that says 1906. The next book that I have here is Under the Greenwood Tree by Thomas Hardy. This is actually a book that I picked up at Half Price Books, and I actually spent a little bit more on this one than I did on most of the books in this haul. By a little bit more, it was $15. You can see the price tag on the inside still. I just love this beautiful green copy that really kind of resonates with the greenness of the story and the seasons within. It doesn't have a date for when it was published in the beginning, and I don't know how to know when it was published. So if you know that, let me know, because it's the same with this next book here, The Vicar of Wakefield by Oliver Goldsmith. I ordered this online from Thrift Books and had no idea that I was getting this gorgeous, gorgeous antique copy because it didn't tell me what it was going to look like. So I was absolutely in awe when I got it because it has the most beautiful end papers here that are just, so lovely. And the book as a whole is quite lovely as well because I just really enjoyed this book when I read it earlier this year. And I still have all my tabs in it from all these quotes and things that I just really loved about it. And I love that it's an ex-library book too. I just always love when I find one that's like that. The earliest dates on there are from 1927, so I'm sure the book is at least that old. This next one is The Master of Ballantrae by Robert Louis Stevenson. I purchased this earlier this year when I went to a really cool used bookstore with my sister. I'll link that blog in case you want to watch it because it was a really neat experience. This one was published in 1922, as you can see from the date there. So it is over 100 years old, and I love finding these little treasures. I think this one was only $3 or $4, so a really good deal for the price. I haven't even had a chance to haul this next book by Victor Hugo, The Toilers of the Sea. I found this at a really cool, unique bookstore when we went to the Smoky Mountains recently, and this was there, and it was just calling my name. They had a lot of really cool antique books that were really expensive, and this one was a bit more on the affordable side, but it has really beautiful illustrations and is part of a set. And again, I actually don't know when this one was published either. I found varying dates online when I checked the publisher, but all the editions looked different than mine, so I'm actually not sure when this was published at all, but I would say that it's close to, if not well over 100 years. The binding's a little bit rough in places, but it can still be read as long as I'm reading it carefully. Unlike this next one, which is The Border Legion by Zane Grey. I actually picked this up at Goodwill for $1. I was shocked. There was a bunch of antique books there, so someone must have just been getting rid of maybe someone's books that had passed away or something like that. But this one is also over 100 years old. I haven't read anything by Zane Grey yet. Actually, I haven't really read very much Westerns at all, so I'm not even sure if this is a book that I would enjoy or not, but it is just so lovely, not just because it's old, but I really like the cover and the spine. It still is in readable condition, but it is in a little bit of rough condition. This next one, I don't know if I could read it at all, The Black Tulip by Alexander Dumas, and you'll see what I mean when I lift the cover here. It is absolutely falling to pieces, and you can see that the binding is just kind of decimated. I could still read it, but the pages are not really attached in most places. But I love how the cover looks and how the spine looks, and I could probably still read it if I was really careful with it. This one also does not have a publication date in the front of it, but it was with other books that were over 100 years old, so I'm sure it's at least that old. I really love the cover of this next one, Her Father's Daughter by Jean Stratton Porter. And I love Jean Stratton Porter's nature writing, so I'm hoping I'll enjoy this whenever I read it. I love all the end papers and the illustrations. It's just so lovely. This one is over 100 years as well, and I found it at a Goodwill outlet. I don't know if you've been to one of those before, but they have huge bins that they just throw all the books in and you just kind of dig through. And so I'm surprised that this book didn't have like the cover ripped off it, because it's kind of loose, the binding in some places. So I'm amazed that it was intact. And it's one of the first like really old books in this collection that I have found. And I really do hope to read it at some point. Next up, we have this sweet little copy of Silas Marner that I found at a thrift store for like 50 cents or something crazy like that. I love it. Has all these notes in the beginning. Steal not this book, my little lad, for $1 it cost my dad. And different people's names and addresses. And I really like when people's names are in the fronts of the book or notes like that. I just find that to be like a really cool connection. But I have a very nostalgic attachment to Silas Marner anyways, as probably many of you know, because my dad actually read it out loud to me when I was quite young, and it was my first exposure to Victorian literature. So this sweet little book is also over 100 pages, published in 1907, as you saw, and in really good condition. It's interesting that it has all these numbers on the lines. I've never seen another George Eliot book that has that, so that's something that feels a bit unique. This book is another Goodwill outlet find, a collection of Poe's mystery short stories or spooky short stories, and it has like a list of all the stories that are in here. I actually have multiple collections that have Poe's works in them, and this one, I'll admit, I have purely for aesthetics, because I do have his entire works in a collection as well. So did I need this? No, I did not, but I paid like 25 cents for it, and it's super beautiful and looks so nice on my shelves, especially with that really pretty red spine. This next little stack might be a bit of a cheat in that these books are not over 100 years old. They are still on the older side, but they were my grandfather's, and so I really, really love them for that reason, and also they're beautiful, and they are old. I just read Grapes of Wrath in September, and it was really special to be able to have this copy of it. So not over 100 years old, but it does have a date in here, and I think it's 1939. So on the older side, but we have not quite yet hit the 100 mark for these books. I found this next book at a local thrift store that was fill a bag with books for $1. So I think I paid maybe 5 cents, maybe 10 cents for this book, which was such a steal. It was published in 1915, so we are over 100 years, almost 110 years on this one, and it's in really, really good condition. It's the sequel to Daddy Longlegs, which is an epistolary novel about a young girl going off to school, writing to her benefactor. And I haven't read the sequel yet, but it looks really fun. I really like this illustration with the cats and skimmed milk. But I love the plaid on the cover. It just feels like really vintage and really fun. This next one is another thrift store find, but it's also an ex-library book that was local to close to where we lived previously in Illinois. And this is a collection of Greek mythology, and I guess we have not quite yet hit the 100-year mark. Next year will be 100 years on this book. Also in really good condition, like the binding is really solid on it and everything. It was one that I was hoping to potentially use in homeschooling when we were going over Greek mythology, but I had some other collections that we ended up using instead. But it is still one that I could see us picking up at some point just for fun, and it has a really lovely cover. I have not read this book, Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm. I love how textured the cover is. All I remember is watching the Shirley Temple movie when I was a kid. So I would like to read it at some point, but this one was published also over 100 years ago. This particular edition was published in 1917. I don't remember where I found this book. Probably thrifting, because that's where most of these came from, but I really like it. I really like the deckled edges, and I kind of like all the wide margins on the pages. It's kind of fun. It makes it look really old as well. This next book is another one that I picked up with my sister at that used bookstore I mentioned earlier. This is a nonfiction about animals, and we read one of his books for homeschool, and so when I saw this, I had to scoop it up because I really like how he writes about animals. This one is almost 120 years old, 1905, so that's really cool. I love the illustrations in this, and the edges are like really pretty deckled edges again, which I know is a controversial thing for people. People seem to either love it or they hate it, but it has all these really cute illustrations in the margin, which I think is really adorable and fun and almost feels like notations on what he's saying about animals. But then in addition to that, we have these really, really beautiful illustrations that are like almost, I guess they're more like half a page than a full page, but they take up a full page of different animals that he's writing about. So it just feels like a little treasure trove of a book. Now we are getting into the oldest books that we own. So this is actually a biography about John Wesley that my dad gave to my husband when he was ordained in our denomination. So this book was published in 1826. So it's almost 200 years old, and it has some spiritual significance as well because the denomination that we are a part of actually was kind of birthed out of Methodism and John Wesley's beliefs and teachings. It's not the same as the Methodist Church, but there's definitely a lot of similarities. So it's really cool to have a book that's this old that is about John Wesley. Definitely a treasure, but surprisingly not the oldest book that we own. That would be this one, which doesn't look like very much on the outside. And it is a book about the Psalms that was published by Isaac Watts, who is a famous hymn writer. And this book was published in 1771. So that's right, I am holding a book in my hands that is older than the Declaration of Independence, which is just absolutely insane. This was given to my husband by a pastor at his parents' church, which is just incredibly kind and generous of him. So this has a lot of stuff about the Psalms in it, as well as excerpts from the Psalms. I haven't actually read most of this book because it's so old, so it kind of scares me a little bit to touch it too much, but it's really beautiful and really special to us. So this is my collection of older books, and this is my encouragement to you to look at thrift stores because you can find some really amazing books if you're willing to dig. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again next time.